vanished in the ranks. The 2003 mystery of Captain Daniel Reese, Fort Bragg, USA. There are places built to keep secrets, and Fort Bragg is one of them. A sprawling military labyrinth where operations vanish, files disappear, and silence speaks louder than gunfire. In May of 2003, Captain Daniel Reese, a soldier known for discipline and precision, stepped into those gates and never stepped out again. No radio calls, no tracks, only an idling jeep and a base that suddenly forgot he ever existed. But stories like Reese's have a strange gravity. The more they're buried, the louder they whisper. Some say he went rogue. Others believe he stumbled upon something the military wasn't ready to reveal, something codenamed Project Sentinel. As we journey into the shadowed corners of Fort Bragg, the lines between fact and secrecy begin to blur. And in that blur, the truth hides, waiting for those who dare to look closer. I'm your host, and this is Mystery Vault 80. Stay with me as we descend into one of the most unsettling vanishings ever sealed in military history. Fort Bragg, a fortress of iron discipline and secret operations, where silence is as common as the sound of marching boots. For decades, it has trained the best and buried its secrets even deeper. On the morning of May 18th, 2003, the base stirred to a strange stillness. A jeep idled by the forest road, engine running, headlights dimmed by the rising sun. Its driver, Captain Daniel Reese, was gone. No footprints led away from the vehicle. No radio calls were made. Only the lingering warmth of the seat suggested he'd been there moments before. Reese wasn't a man who broke routine. He was precision itself, the kind of soldier who lived by the clock and measured every breath in orders and duty. So when he vanished from a location surrounded by surveillance cameras, motion sensors, and armed patrols, the event defied reason. Whispers began to spread among his peers. Talk of classified movements, hidden operations, and a project that didn't officially exist. They called it Sentinel. Reese had mentioned it once, in passing, saying, "Some missions don't end, they get buried." But buried by whom? The Army's first report called it a disciplinary absence. 2 days later, that report vanished from internal servers. Even stranger, Reese's personal files were wiped clean, training logs, medical evaluations, even his last paycheck entry. It was as though the man had been erased from Fort Bragg's own memory. Those who dared to ask questions were transferred to other bases, and the few who remained claimed they saw unmarked vehicles moving in and out of Zone 14 that very night, the same area where Reese's Jeep was found. To this day, no one knows what really happened, but some still hear faint radio chatter on certain frequencies, a looped distress signal repeating every few months. A voice distorted by static, saying only, requesting extraction. Reese, Daniel. Over. Maybe it's a glitch. Or maybe Fort Bragg's ghosts have learned to speak through machines. The perfect officer. Before he vanished, Captain Daniel Reese lived by 3 words. Order is safety. He was the kind of man who pressed his shirts twice, aligned his boots before sleeping, and could recite entire mission codes from memory. To everyone around him, Reese was the Army, precise, disciplined, unbreakable. But perfection has a way of hiding fractures. Those close to him began to notice subtle shifts. The way his eyes darted when radios crackled, or how he'd stop talking mid-sentence when certain names were mentioned. He seemed haunted by something he couldn't say aloud. His wife, Lauren, remembered nights when he'd wake drenched in sweat, whispering phrases like wrong coordinates and ghost unit. Once, she found him outside their quarters, staring into the dark pine forest behind Fort Bragg, whispering, "They're moving it again." When she pressed him for answers, he just shook his head. "Not everything we move," he said, "belongs to us." No one knew what he meant. In his final week, he began shredding documents, backing up encrypted drives, and locking his duffel bag with a chain. He told Sergeant Maddox, his closest friend, "Some missions aren't about who we fight, but what we protect." There was also a new name in his private notes, Project Sentinel, a word that, even years later, still carries an eerie weight. According to declassified whispers, Sentinel wasn't a combat program. It was a containment project. But containment of what? No one has ever proven. Captain Reese told his wife he'd be gone for a few days, helping prep an overseas deployment. He kissed her goodbye, promised dinner on Sunday, and drove toward the northern gates of Fort Bragg. He never came home, and the convoy he mentioned, the one he swore he'd never boarded, was never logged in any manifest. Whatever Daniel Reese stumbled upon inside those classified files, it frightened him enough to burn evidence and warn his wife in code. A perfect officer doesn't make mistakes. But that week, Captain Reese broke his own rules and paid for it with his disappearance. The morning of May 18th, 2003, at 5:42 a.m., the world of Captain Daniel Reese quietly fractured. His wife awoke to find the bed cold, the bathroom light off, and the house unusually silent. The coffee pot, always preset, hadn't brewed. A small detail, but in a man of routines, it meant something had changed. She checked the driveway. His truck was still there, dusted with dew. Keys gone, jacket gone, but his phone sat on the counter, face down, next to a folded note she didn't notice until hours later. It read only 5 words. Don't trust the chain. DR. Those words would become the heartbeat of every theory that followed. At 8 a.m., Lauren called his office. A clerk answered, confused. Captain Reese wasn't scheduled for duty that morning. When she insisted he'd left early for a mission, the reply came cold and flat. Ma'am, there's no mission today. Somewhere between those two statements, a soldier had vanished, and an operation no one could confirm had taken him. Investigators later reconstructed his final known steps using fragmented logs. A gate camera at the base's north perimeter recorded faint headlights at 5:17 a.m. No license plate visible, just the outline of a dark military vehicle. 17 seconds of footage. Then nothing. By noon, that stretch of road was crawling with search teams. Dogs picked up a scent that led them to the service road, where tire tracks ended abruptly in soft mud, as though the vehicle had lifted off the ground. Nearby, investigators found something stranger. A laminated tag, stamped, Sent 3. No such code existed in Fort Bragg's system, and in the forest air, a faint metallic smell lingered, like oil and ozone. Theories began to spiral. Some said Reese was abducted by foreign agents. Others whispered of off-book operations and experimental transport convoys. But a few believed something far darker, that he'd uncovered a secret not even the Army could contain. By nightfall, one fact became clear. Daniel Reese hadn't run away. He'd been removed, and the deeper investigators dug, the more they realized. The morning of May 18th wasn't the day he vanished. It was the day something found him. The search begins. As the sun set over Fort Bragg on May 20th, the air on base felt heavy, charged, as if the ground itself was holding a secret. What began as a simple missing person report had turned into something much stranger. Military police expanded their search beyond the barracks, into miles of dense forest and swampland. Infrared drones swept across the night sky, but nothing appeared. No heat signature, no body, no vehicle. It was as if Captain Daniel Reese had been erased from the map. Then, deep in the northern woods, rangers stumbled upon a scene both ordinary and chilling. A scrap of military fabric caught on a thorn bush, and beside it, a pager. The device was shattered, as though crushed under immense pressure. But when investigators turned it on, its LED flickered for less than a second, displaying one word. Sentinel. The power cell was dead. The display should not have lit up at all. From that moment, every theory fractured. Some said it was a glitch. Others called it a sign. The following night, rangers reported hearing rhythmic metallic sounds, faint and deliberate, echoing from the woods. The noises repeated 3 times, then stopped abruptly like coded signals. At the location they traced the sound to, investigators found an abandoned communications relay tower, rusted, silent, overgrown with vines. Inside, they uncovered a mud-caked notebook. Its cover read, faintly, Sentinel, Level 3. The pages were smeared, waterlogged, nearly unreadable. But tucked between 2 of them was a single Polaroid photo. A close-up of a metallic door embedded in what looked like concrete. The image was grainy, distorted, and cold. The structure didn't exist on any map of Fort Bragg. By dawn, the notebook and photo were gone, removed from evidence by unknown personnel. The official statement claimed they'd found nothing unusual. But off the record, agents spoke in whispers about an unregistered facility, about experiments no one had clearance for, and about a soldier who might have seen too much. That was the moment investigators stopped searching for Daniel Reese's body. They began searching for what he'd found. Whispers and warnings. As weeks passed, the disappearance of Captain Daniel Reese began to unravel into something far more sinister than a missing person case. Stories started to circulate quietly through the base. Strange lights in the northern woods. Unauthorized convoys seen at midnight. And most chilling of all, a sealed underground chamber that appeared on no map. Soldiers who spoke about it claimed to have seen uniformed men wearing insignias they couldn't identify. Patches marked only with a silver triangle and the number 03. Those who questioned were transferred. Others simply stopped showing up. Then, an anonymous letter arrived at a local news desk in Fayetteville. The handwriting was uneven, rushed, as if written under duress. It read, "Captain Reese found something under Fort Bragg. Not natural, not military. Don't let them close it again." The paper turned it over to authorities. 2 days later, the letter vanished from evidence. But fragments of the story spread through the ranks like wildfire. Some claimed Reese stumbled upon an abandoned Cold War bunker that was suddenly reactivated. Others believed he'd uncovered a containment site, something buried long before any of them were born. A former communications tech told an investigator, "We were told not to look at the northern feed that week. Cameras were rerouted. Something big moved, and it wasn't human." When asked to elaborate, he refused. A week later, his base access card was permanently revoked. Every lead pointed to the same forbidden corner of the base, the one marked as 3. The same code found near the river on that metallic tag. Sent 3. The official reports grew thinner, the witnesses fewer, and the silence louder. Something or someone was erasing the truth in real time. And if the whispers were right, Captain Daniel Reese had uncovered something far more dangerous than military corruption. Something alive. The classified silence. By June 2003, it was as if the world had conspired to forget Captain Daniel Reese. Newspapers that once ran his story stopped printing updates. News anchors spoke of him in the past tense, then not at all. And within Fort Bragg, even his name became taboo. An internal memo leaked months later revealed that the Reese investigation had been terminated by direct Pentagon order. Reasons cited: operational sensitivity, Sentinel Tier 3. But no one could explain what Sentinel Tier 3 was. It didn't appear on any database, not even in classified indexes. That's when the silence became unnatural. Lauren Reese began receiving blank envelopes in her mailbox. No return address, no note. Just a small black triangle stamped in the corner. Neighbors reported seeing black SUVs idling near the house, always at night, always with lights off. When she contacted the Fayetteville police, they found nothing. When she contacted military liaison officers, they told her to stay quiet for your safety. Meanwhile, within Fort Bragg, strange activity resumed near the northern sector. Maintenance logs showed unscheduled construction, deep earth drilling at a site previously marked as restricted since 1982. Workers were flown in from out of state, brought in at night, and never seen again. When one soldier leaked photos of heavy machinery under tarps, his account disappeared the next morning. His phone scrubbed, his email wiped. The deeper anyone looked, the faster the silence spread, like something devouring truth itself. And yet, a rumor persisted among the few who dared to whisper. That beneath Fort Bragg lay a facility once sealed after an incident, an experiment gone wrong, and that Captain Reese might have stumbled into its remains. The military had turned its back on one of its own. But the silence wasn't just fear. It was maintenance, containment, as though something dangerous was waking below. Sentinel, active, shadows of command. As investigators dug deeper into Captain Daniel Reese's disappearance, the focus began to shift, away from the barracks and training fields, and toward the higher echelons of Fort Bragg's command. The longer the case lingered without resolution, the clearer it became that this was not a simple case of desertion or misadventure. Something larger, something colder, was at play. Within the base, whispers spread through the ranks. Junior officers spoke in low tones about the captain who knew too much. Rumors surfaced that Reese had stumbled upon classified information during a recent operation briefing, something involving covert transfers, off-the-book missions, and unreported casualties. To some, it sounded like conspiracy talk. To others, it explained everything. One of Reese's closest friends, Sergeant First Class Martin Hollis, later revealed to investigators that Daniel had been unusually tense during their final conversation. Hollis recalled him saying, "If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident." It was a chilling statement that would take on grim significance in the weeks that followed. As military investigators began pulling communication logs and personal correspondences, they discovered discrepancies, emails deleted from servers, missing pages from Reese's notebook, and an access card last used at a restricted storage site known as Building 47B. Inside that building, according to records, Reese had authorization to review a shipment manifest connected to an unnamed, classified operation. The file was later sealed by military intelligence. Outside Fort Bragg, media attention intensified. Civilian reporters camped at the gates, pushing for answers, demanding transparency. Yet every official statement seemed scripted, cold, precise, and strangely uniform. Reese's family, once hopeful, grew frustrated. His wife, Emily, appeared before the press, her voice trembling. "I don't care about rank or protocol. I just want to know what happened to my husband." But the military's stonewall held firm. Requests for information were delayed or outright denied. When journalists filed Freedom of Information Act requests, the responses were heavily redacted, entire pages blacked out, names omitted, timelines blurred. Inside Fort Bragg, the tension was suffocating. Officers avoided eye contact when questioned, while others quietly requested transfers. To speak about Captain Reese was to invite scrutiny, or worse. The men and women who had served with him described an eerie sense of being watched, as though someone wanted the entire matter to fade away. Yet, not everyone was willing to stay silent. A civilian contractor, who requested anonymity, reached out to local media, claiming he'd seen something unusual on the night of Reese's disappearance. A convoy of unmarked vehicles leaving the base at 2:47 a.m., heading toward the dense woodland bordering the facility. No one could confirm it, but his description of the convoy's timing aligned perfectly with the last recorded use of Reese's access card. By this point, the disappearance had evolved from a missing persons case into a labyrinth of secrets. Every new lead only deepened the confusion. Some suspected espionage. Others whispered about an internal cover-up. The phrase classified containment began appearing in anonymous tips sent to investigators and journalists alike. The official investigation slowed to a crawl. Reese's personal belongings were sealed, his case file stamped pending. The military silence grew louder than any denial. And as the days turned into months, even those who had once believed in the institution's integrity began to doubt. Something about this disappearance wasn't procedural, it was deliberate. Captain Daniel Reese had not simply vanished. He had been erased. The silent files. Months had passed since Captain Daniel Reese's disappearance, and Fort Bragg had begun to settle into a strange rhythm of denial. The official narrative was fixed. Ongoing investigation. No foul play suspected. But inside the walls of the base, a quiet unease lingered. Soldiers whispered that the captain's office lights were sometimes seen flickering late at night, even though the door had been sealed by command. Others swore they heard his name in fragments of radio chatter, call signs that hadn't been used since the week he vanished. Still, the deeper questions persisted. Where had Captain Reese gone, and why did those who asked too many questions start to disappear from the conversation? In late November 2003, a young intelligence analyst named Corporal Linda Greer, known for her persistence, was reassigned after reportedly accessing Reese's encrypted personnel logs without clearance. Her superiors claimed it was a routine administrative move, but Greer confided in a friend before leaving Fort Bragg. They're hiding something. His file isn't just missing, it's been rewritten. What did that mean? When investigators compared her claims with the official documents, they noticed subtle inconsistencies. Dates didn't align. Orders referenced operations that, according to Pentagon records, had never existed. A name, Project Talon, appeared faintly stamped on a redacted page. No one could determine what it meant, but it would soon become central to the case. Outside military walls, a freelance journalist named Eric Walsh refused to let the story die. He'd covered war-zone disappearances before, but something about Reese's case disturbed him. "It's like trying to track a ghost," he told a local station. His persistence paid off when an anonymous source, calling themselves Echo 7, sent him an unmarked package containing a single flash drive. On that drive were fragments of internal communications, all dated within 48 hours of Reese's disappearance. The subject line on one of the emails read, "Containment protocol activated, subject R. No sender, no recipient. Just metadata linking it to a secured terminal inside Building 47B, the same location Reese had last accessed." The military denied everything. But Walsh's findings sparked a quiet storm online. Conspiracy forums exploded with theories. Some claimed Reese had uncovered war crimes. Others suggested he defected after learning of covert operations overseas. And then there were the more unsettling whispers that Reese had been part of an experiment in psychological warfare, and that his disappearance was the result of an operation gone wrong. For Emily Reese, these theories were torture. Each new rumor twisted the knife of uncertainty. She appeared on a televised interview, her eyes tired but determined. If Daniel's alive, someone knows. And if he's gone, someone's responsible. The interviewer pressed her about the military silence. Emily paused, then said something that would echo across the internet. "The truth doesn't vanish. People make it vanish." Meanwhile, Eric Walsh's source went dark. His emails bounced, calls were never returned. Then, one cold morning, a plain manila envelope was found at his doorstep. No note, no name, just a photograph inside. It showed a single man walking near a restricted section of the base, his head turned away. The timestamp read December 2nd, 2003, 5 months after Daniel Reese was declared missing. Walsh took the photo to digital analysts. But before he could publish the story, his website was suddenly taken offline by an unexplained system breach. He filed a police report the next day, and then, 2 weeks later, Walsh himself went missing. No one ever found his car. No trace of his laptop. No answers. What began as one soldier's disappearance was now spiraling into something much bigger. A chain reaction of silence and fear stretching far beyond Fort Bragg. It was becoming clear, whatever truth lay buried in those sealed files, someone was willing to bury anyone who got too close. The whistleblower. By early 2004, the disappearance of Captain Daniel Reese had become more than a cold case. It was a quiet scandal. Within Fort Bragg, the mere mention of his name could end a conversation. Outside, online forums and underground journalists had begun to weave theories of corruption, espionage, and psychological warfare. But among the noise, one voice began to rise above the rest. Someone who claimed to know what really happened. The first communication came in the form of a hand-delivered envelope to a local newspaper in Fayetteville. Inside were two things: a typewritten note and a photocopy of a classified clearance form stamped with Reese's name. The note was brief, just 7 words. He was part of something they couldn't control. The newspaper dismissed it as another hoax, until 2 days later, the editor's car was broken into and the envelope was gone. At the same time, an independent investigative journalist named Marie Holden, who had worked with Eric Walsh before his disappearance, received an encrypted message from a sender calling themselves Sentinel. The message read, "If you want the truth about Captain Reese, meet me where it started." Attached was a GPS coordinate, an area near the wooded perimeter of Fort Bragg, close to where the convoy had been sighted on the night Reese vanished. Marie was cautious. She contacted Reese's wife, Emily, and together they made the trip. As they arrived at the isolated location, the silence of the forest pressed in around them. There, hidden under a loose plank near an abandoned storage shed, they discovered a weathered box sealed with tape. Inside were two items: a stack of old floppy disks labeled Talon and a single dog tag engraved D. Reese, U.S. Army. When the disks were later examined by a cybersecurity expert, fragments of encrypted logs emerged. References to psychological endurance trials, unauthorized personnel transfers, and something labeled cognitive disruption protocol. The implications were chilling. Had Captain Reese been part of a secret project that blurred the line between mind and obedience? Before Marie could verify the files, her contact, Sentinel, resurfaced one last time with a stark warning. You're not chasing a disappearance. You're chasing containment. They'll make you vanish too. Days later, military police were reported combing the same wooded area. No warrant, no announcement. When journalists questioned the operation, officials claimed it was a routine training exercise. But those who lived near the base knew better. They'd seen similar convoys once before, back in July 2003, the night Captain Reese disappeared. In March 2004, Marie Holden published a detailed exposé under the headline, "The Vanished Soldier: Secrets the Military Won't Release." The article went viral, drawing both attention and intimidation. Her email accounts were hacked, her office vandalized, and unmarked vehicles began idling outside her home. But the piece had done its job. It reignited public interest and forced the Department of Defense to issue a rare statement. Their response was chillingly clinical. No evidence has been found connecting Captain Daniel Reese's disappearance to any classified or unauthorized activity. The case remains open but inactive. Inactive, a single word that told the world everything it needed to know. Behind the scenes, Emily Reese was quietly compiling her own file: letters, photographs, and the recovered discs. With help from Marie and a few trusted contacts, she began mapping out patterns, names that appeared repeatedly in the redacted reports, flight logs, and military memos. One name kept resurfacing: Colonel Nathaniel Briggs, a commanding officer who had personally signed off on Reese's last mission authorization. Briggs was later reassigned overseas, without interview, without comment. But the silence only deepened suspicion. The people who sought the truth about Captain Reese had started to vanish themselves. Journalists, contractors, even lower-ranking officers. One by one, their voices fell quiet. It was no longer a story about one man's disappearance. It was a pattern, systematic, deliberate, and terrifyingly efficient. Somewhere deep in the structure of command, the answer existed. But to find it, someone would have to step beyond secrecy and into danger. Beneath the surface, by the spring of 2004, the disappearance of Captain Daniel Reese had become a haunting shadow over Fort Bragg. The official investigation had stalled, the press had moved on, and those who dared to keep asking questions were either reassigned, silenced, or made to disappear into bureaucratic fog. But for Emily Reese and Marie Holden, stopping was no longer an option. The case had taken everything from them, and the truth was now the only thing left to lose. Emily had grown colder, sharper. Months of unanswered calls and redacted reports had hardened her grief into resolve. Marie, too, had changed. She was no longer chasing a story. She was chasing accountability. Together, they began to piece together the fragments left behind: the floppy disks, the leaked files, the unexplained movements of Colonel Nathaniel Briggs. One night, Marie received an anonymous message through a secure email service. The sender called themselves Ghostline. The message read, "If you want answers, look below. The base has levels they don't list." Attached was a crude map, not of the visible sections of Fort Bragg, but of an underground network labeled CUB Facility 12. Among the scrawled notes was one familiar name: Project Talon. When Emily showed the document to a retired engineer who had once worked on infrastructure contracts for the military, he confirmed something chilling. Yes, they're underground structures. They were built decades ago during Cold War expansions, officially for storage and testing. Unofficially, who knows? That revelation set their plan into motion. Marie used her remaining contacts in the press to obtain a temporary clearance under the pretext of a follow-up on defense budgeting. Emily, meanwhile, managed to secure an invitation to the base's family memorial ceremony, a yearly event commemorating fallen service members. It would be the perfect cover for both of them to get inside. On the morning of April 23, 2004, the two women entered Fort Bragg for what they privately called the final search. The base was alive with uniformed personnel, salutes, and speeches. But while the ceremony unfolded outside, Marie slipped away, heading toward the administrative wing where the blueprints indicated a sealed elevator shaft leading underground. The door was locked, coded, and under camera watch, except that one camera, according to the maintenance schedule Marie had memorized, had been disabled for servicing. With trembling hands, she swiped an old clearance card left behind by one of her former contacts in logistics. Against all odds, the light turned green. The elevator descended slowly, humming through the air like a heartbeat. When the doors opened, she stepped into silence. The corridor stretched endlessly, lined with metal doors and flickering fluorescent lights. On one wall, faded letters spelled out, Talon Research Division, Active Operations Unit. Marie's recorder captured everything, the faint hum of machines, the echo of her footsteps, and the low whine of distant ventilation. She entered one of the rooms. Inside, she found what looked like an observation chamber, glass walls, medical restraints, and a control console still faintly glowing with power. On the monitor, an archived file blinked. Subject D. Reese. Status. Terminated June 12, 2003. Marie froze. The date. Less than 2 weeks after Reese was declared missing. The entry suggested he hadn't vanished at all. He'd been classified. But before she could photograph the screen, she heard voices. Footsteps, not hers, moving fast down the corridor. She grabbed her recorder and slipped behind a partition as 2 uniformed men entered the room. One spoke quietly. Command wants this entire floor cleared. No digital traces, no backups. The other replied, already done. Everything goes to Raven Division by morning. Marie waited until the voices faded before retreating toward the elevator. When she surfaced, she found Emily waiting in the crowd, panic etched across her face. You were gone too long, she whispered. They're looking for you. That night, the two fled the base under cover of darkness. Marie uploaded her audio recordings and documents to a secure drive, one she shared with 2 trusted contacts overseas, just in case. Then she called Emily, her voice shaking. He didn't disappear, Emily. They erased him. Emily didn't speak for a long time. When she finally did, her voice was steady. Then we make sure the world knows his name. But the world would not be kind. The next morning, Marie's hotel room was found empty. No signs of struggle. Her phone and laptop missing. The file she'd uploaded was gone from every cloud server it had been sent to. Only one copy remained, the encrypted backup Emily had hidden at home. The truth now rested entirely in her hands. And the people who made Daniel Reese vanish were closing in. The last transmission. 3 days after Marie Holden vanished, Emily Reese found herself standing at the edge of her driveway in Boston, clutching a small envelope that had been slid under her door sometime during the night. There was no return address, no handwriting, just a plain seal and a single word printed in black ink across the front. Talon. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a memory card and a single line written on a torn notepad. He left this for you. Don't trust anyone. Emily loaded the card onto her computer. What she found would both confirm her worst fears and ignite a nationwide storm. The file contained a short, grainy video recorded in a dimly lit room. The man in the frame was gaunt, unshaven, and dressed in fatigues. His voice was weak, but unmistakable. It was Captain Daniel Reese. If you're watching this, he began, then I didn't make it out. Project Talon isn't what they told us. They were testing us, pushing human limits. I saw men lose themselves, not from combat, but from what they were doing to our minds. He coughed, lowering his head before continuing. They said it was to make us stronger. But the truth is, they broke something in us, something that can't be fixed. I tried to report it. That's why I'm gone. The video cut abruptly, ending with a timestamp. June 10th, 2003, 2:41 a.m. Emily sat in silence, tears welling in her eyes. She replayed the clip over and over, listening for any background noise, any clue that could point to where it had been recorded. In the faint hum behind his voice, a sharp-eared audio technician later detected a pattern. 3 distinct pulses that matched the electrical frequency used in underground power systems at Fort Bragg. It was proof. Captain Reese had been speaking from within the very facility the military denied existed. Emily knew she couldn't keep it hidden. Within 24 hours, she reached out to a network of independent journalists, some who had worked with Marie, others who had followed the case from afar. They agreed to release the footage simultaneously across multiple channels, making it impossible for anyone to suppress it quietly. When the video went live, it exploded across every platform. Viewers were horrified, fascinated, and divided. Some claimed it was fabricated, a conspiracy hoax designed to discredit the military. Others recognized Daniel's face and uniform from official service photos. Public outcry grew. Major news outlets picked up the story, demanding a response from the Pentagon. The Department of Defense issued a curt statement. The video in question cannot be authenticated. Captain Daniel Reese remains missing and presumed deceased. Project Talon has no official record of existence. But the words rang hollow. For the first time, the silence had cracks in it. Anonymous insiders began to leak more fragments, transport logs, clearance rosters, internal memos referencing Talon Subject 3. Each leak added to the growing storm, painting a picture of psychological experimentation, unauthorized conditioning programs, and buried casualties. Within months, a congressional inquiry was announced, though many doubted it would ever reach the truth. Too many names, too many files had already been erased. Emily testified before the committee, holding her husband's dog tags in her hand. They could deny everything, she said, but my husband didn't vanish. He was taken, and there are others like him. Her words echoed across the room and across the nation. But even as the hearings began, strange things continued to happen. Witnesses reported break-ins. Evidence disappeared. Digital files went missing from secure servers. Someone was still cleaning up the past. The inquiry quietly dissolved a year later. No conclusions. No charges. Officially, Captain Daniel Reese remained missing in action. Yet, deep in the corners of the internet, his story lived on, shared, debated, immortalized. The last frame of his video became a haunting emblem. A man who looked straight into the camera, weary but defiant, as though daring the world to remember. If I disappear, he'd said, don't let them write my ending. And the world never did. Because every time his story is told, every time his name is spoken, the silence cracks again. Captain Daniel Reese may have vanished, but his truth refuses to die. Years have passed, but Fort Bragg never forgets. Some soldiers still refuse to walk the northern trail at dawn, the last place Captain Reese was seen. They say the air turns colder there. They say they hear a voice calling for extraction long after the search ended. Whether you believe in cover-ups or curses, the truth remains lost between classified pages and midnight whispers. But every mystery leaves a trail, and tonight, we've only taken the first step. If this story moved you, share it. Your comments, theories, and thoughts help keep these stories alive and guide us toward the next unsolved secret hiding in plain sight. Until we meet again, keep your lights low, your curiosity high, and remember, in every silence, there's a mystery waiting to be found.